So my name is Charley Pothecary. I'm a service designer at Idean, and I'm going to be talking about the business case for inclusive design today. And in particular, going to be talking about how we internally at Idean are trying to make the case to our clients for inclusive design. So the aim today is to help you to encourage others to be able to design more inclusively. We're going to be talking about what is inclusive design. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. We're going to be talking about why it's important, but also how do we make other people see why it's important, particularly clients, and fighting some of the barriers that those clients will often maybe come back with us against, and maybe some tips and tricks. So going to start with a quick activity, borrowing from Alistair. It's going to be a hands up one, so I hope you're all ready. So can you please put your hand up and keep it up if you've ever missed your tube stop because you were listening to music maybe a little bit too loud? Okay, so keep your hands up. Put your hand up and keep it up if you've ever travelled with lots of luggage or a large suitcase across London. Okay, a few more. Put your hand up if you've ever had a really sore throat and it hurts to speak. Okay, and put your hand up and keep it up if you've ever fallen over or almost fallen over on the tube because you're carrying way too many things and you can't hold on to the railings. Right, so that's pretty much everyone in the room. So the point being, everyone put their hand up at that point. Most people experience a temporary impairment at some point in their lives. So one of the largest barriers that we have when we're asking clients to understand why it's important to be accessible and to design inclusively is people will think that it's not just for kind of everybody, it's just only particularly for people that have disabilities. However, an easy way of us being able to explain that design for all is just making better design is to be able to get them to understand that everyone will experience temporary impairments at some point. So this is really key to us at Idean. Idean is a global design agency with now, I believe, 22 studios across the world. Here is a picture of the Idean studio team. We're all we're pretending to be our favourite animals. We don't always look that weird. What do? We help organisations to be human-centred. We try and always create purposeful impact. So what is inclusive design? We feel that inclusive design is the design of mainstream products and services that can be used and enjoyed by as many people as possible. The key word in there being enjoyed. It's not about just making sure that someone can access a service, it's about making sure that's a brilliant service experience for everyone. So we really believe that a disability is a mismatch between a person's ability and their environment. And the key word in there being environment. Environment is something that you can change, we can improve, we can make it better. We can improve the kind of services and products that are out there that we're building. So, as I'm sure many of you know, inclusive design is not new. The approach has been developing for many years. Government is doing it very well. Obviously, government has a mandate and we need to be doing it. The private sector, unfortunately, sucks. We don't have a mandate to be doing it and we're not doing it a lot. We're not obliged to be making those services accessible. So I'm sure many people in this room are very familiar with some of these posters, the do's or don'ts around designing for different disabilities. One thing that comes up quite often is people will try and understand what is the difference between accessibility and inclusive design. So we experience internally and when working with clients that many people understand what accessibility might mean, but don't quite grapple with what inclusivity is. So I think people mainly know around accessibility because of like web content accessibility guidelines, but we really see inclusive design as being more about that mindset, being able to think about how to make that service experience the best for everyone, not just making it accessible for everyone. So therefore, accessibility is a basic requirement we see. Inclusivity is more of a mindset. So designing inclusively benefits the majority, not only the minority. However, another hands up exercise. Put your hands up if you know of any services that force you to make a phone call at some point in the process. Yeah, I think most of us are putting our hands up because we probably have to dealing with utility companies. They're probably one of the worst culprits, unfortunately. But we've also got Oyster up here. So one example is if you want to get refunded by Oyster, you have to call up. And that's a classic trick from service companies, making sure that they're putting that added friction in there. It's a lot more effort for us to be calling up. However, what does that mean for someone if they're really unconfident kind of using the phone, or if they are deaf or anything like that? So has anyone else got any other examples around kind of services that are making you have to pick up the phone?
Cancel a subscription for New York Times.
Cancelling a subscription. Sorry.
Hospital appointment. Change.
It's okay, I'll repeat. So changing a hospital appointment, exactly. And we had cancelling a subscription for New York Times. Cancelling things or signing up for things is a common one where they make you do it.
I've got a really bad one.
Go for it.
Cancelling a Beer 52 subscription.
What's Beer 52?
Beer company that sends you beers every month.
So it's that added friction that they think is okay to make you only use one channel, one touch point.
Replace your taxi card. So the taxi card scheme is for disabled people across London. You have to phone up if you need it replaced, or to change your name on it, anything like that.
So just to repeat back for anyone that didn't catch that, that's replacing your taxi card, meaning that you have to call up to be able to get that replaced. Any others?
I don't understand, I'm dyslexic, so I don't understand what content is on the FAQ and then you have to call up.
Yeah. So HMRC tax return, I'm sure that's a real pain point in the room right now with many people. Yep.
I went to a car park where you could only pay for your parking by phone.
Yeah, that's really started to crop up, paying only for car parking spaces with your phone. It's a nightmare. Okay, we've got a few more of these, so we'll come back to other people as well. Okay, so another kind of example, put your hand up if you know of any service counters that are not at a sensible height for maybe wheelchair users, those with dwarfism, or even shorter people like myself. Okay, I've got one example up here, post office. My local post office, I've seen so many terrible interactions having to happen where the person behind the screen is having to get up, peer down, it doesn't quite work with the microphones anymore, so people can't hear each other, and it's just completely taking away any enjoyment that could have possibly be happening in that interaction. Has anyone else got any? Go for it.
Also hotel check-in desks.
Yeah, hotel check-in desks, absolutely.
Desks in many, paying desks in many shops where you wouldn't be able to wheel a wheelchair underneath, so it's basically the desk is straight instead of the desk going up with an indent for a wheelchair to fit under.
Yeah, so that was paying desks. I also think self-scanning as well is often at quite an odd height, whether you're very tall or very short or you're in a wheelchair. It's not easy to use.
Clothes shops and also where you return your clothes in the changing rooms.
Yeah, so that's returning your clothes in the changing rooms and where the rails are, how high they are, that sort of thing. Okay, go for it. One more.
Airport customs.
Yeah.
You're here anyway at average size, so it must be tremendous.
I mean, airport customs has got to be one of the worst service experiences for everyone, right? Constantly hopping around with one shoe on. So, one more. Put your hand up if you know of any services that are not easily used with a screen reader or have many hidden links. So I'm just going to describe what I mean by hidden links, just in case anyone in the room doesn't know what they are. So hidden links are when we probably do it quite a lot in emails, all of us. So if there's one thing that we take away from today is not doing any hidden links. So when you say, please find the Insight document here, and that's where you embed the link just in the here bit. So if you're using a screen reader, you're not going to be able to know exactly what you're clicking on there. It's just going to be here, and you don't know what's about to pop up. So the reason why I put LinkedIn up here, Molly Watts, fantastic speaker, has been here before. Highly recommend that you go and see some of her earlier talks. But she recently wrote a blog post about how bad LinkedIn is. I didn't realize how bad LinkedIn was for screen readers, but it's terrible. I don't know if anyone else has got any examples of other services that are particularly bad for this sort of thing. Yeah.
I bought my niece a gift voucher for a clothes shop that she really likes. It's an online service,
behind the screen reader or anything like that, I couldn't use it. And I make websites for a living, and I couldn't use it. And it was really difficult. All I was trying to do was fill in a form to buy a gift voucher. I dread to think what that was like for somebody with a screen reader or something like that. I have used Marks and Spencer's website before and found similar problems where they had a massive menu that just was impossible to navigate, even without a screen reader.
It always seems to be the services that you've maybe already paid for and they don't seem to really care too much more because you're not going to be spending more money on that bit, doesn't it? Any others? Yeah.
A lot of voucher sites like Groupon and
Yeah.
Cloud.
What's the main bit that's really bad about that?
So they're not all accessible by a screen reader. The links aren't well written, so they've got a lot of click here or see below. But also, as well as screen readers, they're not good for people who zoom in. So for me, I use a lower resolution. And when I go onto Groupon, there's a pop-up which is bigger than my screen, and I cannot possibly exit it.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
So that was, for anyone else that couldn't hear at the back, that was about kind of lower resolution and pop-ups being really bad on a lot of voucher sites. Okay. So we all know that all of these things are not okay. We've all got so many of these kind of almost war stories, annoying stories of terrible services that we're having to use. But why does it still happen? So unfortunately, inclusive design is still seen as an add-on, seen as a nice to have, so maybe we'll get round to later. I've been in meetings where it's like that, and it really aggravates me. So we know it's a huge market. It's estimated that in the UK, the purple pound is worth 212 billion. So that's a fair amount of spending power that you're completely missing out on if you're not thinking about designing inclusively. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Purple Tuesday movement. It was a couple of months ago now, where it was a customer-facing kind of movement to try and make people more aware of the challenges and to inspire them to be designing more inclusively and thinking about their service experience, particularly within high street retail chains. It was really successful, and there's been lots of other things happening like this. However, there's still a huge lack of awareness. We're seeing it every day with the clients that we're kind of engaging with. So about 15% of the world's population lives with some sort of disability. In the UK, it's thought that 7 million people of a working age have a disability, and about 15% of the world's, and about 45% of adults over a state pension age in Great Britain are disabled. Now, I'm sure we're familiar with stats and facts like this, but unfortunately, these are the main things that enable us to get through to clients, is being able to say, look, it's this many people that are affected. It's not you thinking it's just people over here, it's everyone. Like, we need to be designing inclusively. So I'm now going to talk through 5 ways to help you to empower others to design inclusively. And these are really centered around some of the main arguments that we have clients kind of coming back with us. So the first thing we need to do is being able to embed an inclusive mindset within a team. So obviously we need to be kind of educating and engaging our stakeholders and our clients when we're doing this. But some of the main things that we see that they come back to us with are things like this. So again, I'm clearly a massive fan of the hands up thing. Put your hands up if you've heard this argument before. We don't have budget for that. Yeah, I think this one's the most common one. So our rebuttal against that, as we're trying to improve and encourage people to design inclusively, is if we don't have the budget, but can we really afford not to do it? So often organisations believe designing inclusively will cost more, so they don't do it. Arguably, it does at times. However, the impact of not doing it can have a huge negative impact on your brand. 3/4 of disabled people and their families have left a shop or a business because of poor customer service or a lack of disability awareness. So that's a large amount of people that you're letting come into your service, use your product to begin with, and then they're going to be leaving it. What about this argument? We can fix this later, let's just launch it now. Hands up if we've heard that one a few times. Right. So the thing that's so frustrating about this is if you make it inclusive from the start, you're going to be saving money in the long run. It costs so much more apparently 10 times more to be able to fix something that isn't inclusive from the beginning, especially when we're talking about kind of accessible code for screen readers and that sort of thing. So many organisations will tack inclusive or accessible design onto the end of a product, if at all, and it just costs so much more to do that. This is the one that really upsets me, and it just makes no sense. So hands up if you've ever heard this argument: they're not the user group we're trying to reach anyway. I mean, where to start with this one? So we've already done the kind of temporary impairment hands up approach. We all experience temporary impairments at points, but also with longer life expectancies and an aging population, we're going to have more impairments and disabilities. Everyone will be continuing to experience temporary impairments, and as we've previously stated, 34% of the UK adult population have an impairment. So that's not a small amount of people that are not able to use your service or product. So inclusive design is better design for everyone. The second thing that we need to be doing is making sure that we understand all of our potential users and their contexts. So the main thing here is when we're designing kind of personas and we're designing for various kind of user groups and user segments, is thinking about what is the true representative demographic within that may have impairments or disabilities. So hands up whoever's created a set of personas. We know previously there's quite a lot of designers in the room, okay? So keep your hand up if it's included personas with an impairment or disability. Okay, quite a few. But there will have been a few people that might have put their hand back down. And we've all been there, unfortunately. It's quite commonplace. It's something that we're trying to change internally, a large amount at Idean at the moment. But it's easy for people to slip into this kind of category. So building true representative personas and having them kind of on the backlog and always making sure that you're using them and thinking about designing for lots of different contexts and situations will help us to be designing inclusively. So we can find out what impairment prevalence there is by going onto kind of different Gov websites. So we can always be looking up exactly what kind of users might be coming towards this service. The other thing that we can do to kind of break down barriers and get people to really understand what inclusive design is about and why it's important are simulation tools. So simulation tools are a great way of building empathy. However, I can't stress this enough, they always have to be used with a pinch of salt. So the biggest concern for me around empathy tools, whilst they're brilliant at people suddenly having that aha moment at times, especially when using kind of vision simulation glasses and things like that, the problem is that, especially if we're designers when trying this, we can start to feel a little bit more attached to our own experience of what it's like to be visually impaired than listening to the research and insights and working with someone who is visually impaired consistently. So a simulation is just a simulation. It's not a true representative experience of what it's like to live with an impairment, but they have their place and they can be very good at making people suddenly go, oh, okay, that's why we need to be doing this. Other things like Chromevox are a great way of just quickly understanding what it might be like to be using a screen reader, and the same with Totally. So third thing that we can be doing to be designing more inclusively is design with our users and not just for them. So when we've started to create our kind of propositions and concepts, we need to further co-create these ideas with all of our different user segments, and this will help to make sure we're meeting their needs. So this is quite a strong statement of vouchers don't pay bills. There was a fantastic talk done at Idean a couple of months ago. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Service Lab, it was part of that. And a person called Edward Richards from Cutting Edge came in and spoke to us. And he was saying, whilst it's brilliant, there's so much kind of co-creation that is now happening with people with disabilities and making sure that we're bringing them into the process, he's fed up of being brought in just for co-design sessions, given vouchers, and then being on his way. There's a real lack of us actually being able to employ designers with disabilities and having them throughout the process, rather than just bringing them in at key points and then letting them go away. There's a lot more value that can be added by having someone throughout the process. So the fourth thing is about evaluating our ideas with users. So there's lots of tools out there to help us to assess how accessible a product or service is, and these are useful to a certain extent, but it's important to always be testing these with users that have varying levels of impairments or disabilities, and really importantly, in the context that they might actually be using them in. So one way in which we've been doing this is we've been working with Centrica. There's a few people from the Centrica team in the audience I can see. And we've been working with Centrica to improve their identification and payment services. And we've ensured and worked with them closely to make sure that each new addition to the pattern library is always consistently tested against accessibility standards. And Centrica always works with RNIB and MENCAP to ensure that our user testing groups are included to have participants who are blind, visually impaired, or neurotypical. We also have designers across the organisation who will have impairments and disabilities on varying scale, and they'll be able to help us evaluate the designs as we go. The fifth thing that we need to be doing is continuously iterating and updating. So to create any good service or product, the key is continuous iteration or improvement. Many of us know that as designers in the room. But when we're creating a service or product that's going to be used with accessible technology, things change rapidly. We need to always be updating them and checking back in. We can't just create it and think that would be it forever and it's accessible and we've done a great job, pat on the back. We need to make sure that it continually works with different kind of integrations. I think there's going to be a lot more on this sort of subject later on. So one way that we've been doing this at Idean is Smarty. Smarty is a new SIM-only mobile network that we launched last year, and it's built to be simple and honest. And we ensured from the start to be inclusive in the way that we approach gender labels. So we decided we didn't need to ask them. This is kind of a backwards and forwards that we had for quite a while to really prove that we really didn't need to be asking this. We don't. And we ensure that our design patterns will always be including inclusive links. So, to summarise, first we need to be embedding an inclusive mindset within our team, educating our stakeholders and having those kind of difficult conversations with clients. We need to be using kind of empathy tools to get people to understand what it might be like and understand why it's so important to be doing this. We then need to be making sure that we understand all of our potential users and their context, and then be designing with them. We also need to be evaluating our ideas with users and continuously updating and iterating them to make sure that it doesn't just work from the beginning, but it will work for years to come. So, keep fighting the good fight. It's hard doing this internally. There's a few kind of supporters internally here tonight, but I'm sure it's a very difficult movement to try and create sometimes, and we will have to kind of create allies, which is why I've been such a kind of strong coming every week to this event. That's mainly it. So if I can open up some questions, that'd be great.